we're going to try to make this session quite interactive. I don't know how many of you have heard about Persado and what we do, or what we're trying to kind of like get the whole industry to do. Actually, who has heard of us? Okay, good. Yeah, we suck at PR. We're really trying to change that. But we've been operating for around 7 years, a bit longer in the US than in Europe. We're very, very young in Europe. That's why you haven't heard of us. But essentially what we try to do is bring a little bit of discipline, a little bit of data to inform the creative process. And today, hopefully, I will have you experience in your own bodies what guesswork in action is and how technology could hopefully help towards that. So first of all, the infamous icebreaker. So now that you guys are sitting together, maybe a little bit too close together, can you just turn around and talk for 5 minutes about what your dream job would be like? Okay, guys. Good. We're gonna resume over here. So I hope you enjoyed a couple of minutes of speaking about yourselves. It's done. No, but hopefully that kind of like warmed yourselves up and you got to meet your neighbors because you will be in teams. But I'll actually tell you why I joined Persado. So I come from the media industry. I'm actually a shiny little object follower. I did mobile before iPhone and then programmatic advertising and so on and so on. But I realized that at some point, all of these technology behind trying to find the person to market would hit a wall. And I was talking to Alex, one of our founders, about what they were doing. And I did realize that they had hit on what, for me, as a marketeer, had been a big blind spot, right? The good news, even if you've already maxed out your digital marketing stack, which probably you haven't, is that there is one blind spot that is quite easy to grab and is left out there for you. So a lot of probably what you will be speaking about today and in many other conferences with your colleagues is on that, it's there, okay, I can see it here. On that sort of like left-hand side, right? There's a lot of data informing all of your decisions as marketeers around targeting or pricing or putting this product or that product in front of that particular person. But when it comes to coming up with the creative, when it comes to deciding and making your choices on how you're communicating that to that audience or to that particular individual, is largely based on guesswork. And it is natural that is based on guesswork. We tend to relate creativity to something that is exclusively human, and probably it is. But that is why it's an area that has never been informed by data, or at most very, very loosely informed by data. Some people do some level of rudimentary A/B testing, or they try to capture on an Excel sheet what they have learned from previous campaigns. But if you bring some discipline and some technology to that space, the results can actually be staggering. And that is why I joined Persado. So I'm going to give you an example in practice about how powerful this can actually be. So you see kind of like two women there. One of them is actually me, and the other one is my neighbor, Kate. And we're pretty cliche, so we live in the suburbs. We have a house, I have a dog, she has a cat, and we have a couple of kids. We're both looking for an SUV, because again, we're pretty cliche, and we need a bigger space for the prams and the dogs and all of those things. And we're probably in some DMP or database or CRM of Audi and Porsche and all of the brands that we're looking for, saying, this is a good target for me because we have the income, we're in market, and we want to purchase that product. So we could be seen as two very, very identical individuals. And when the marketeer to try to grab us to their website to check out and maybe get a test drive or whatever it is putting an ad in front of us, they will most likely put the same ad. Because all that matters is that I have the money and I'm looking for an SUV. But that is not the case. And there's a lot more sophisticated things that you can do with the right data and the right understanding of what makes me resonate as a consumer. So beyond having a house in the suburbs and 2 kids and having the money and needing an SUV, I'm also a very, very overprotective Mediterranean mama. So something like that will definitely resonate with me, because something with an emotion around safety will make me look at that. So in the few milliseconds that a brand is going to get my attention when I'm browsing online, that thing there will make me jump because it resonates with me. But Kate, she's an explorer, she's an adventurer, she's an artist actually. So something around encouragement or adventure will be the best thing that you can put in front of her. You're competing for her attention within 1 or 2 seconds. Now, it's impossible for us as humans to be able to do all of that through digital screens because the possibilities are simply endless. But with technology, you can do that. And the reason why that's important is because even if everything else is right, if you get targeting right and pricing right and the product right, if you do not get your communication right, you could be leaving a ton of money on the table. So I've seen lifts in campaigns of more than 400% here in the UK in terms of sales, because the amount of additional people that you can bring through your funnel if you write the right message is just staggering. So you don't need to take my word for an answer, but essentially we're trying to evangelize to the entire industry, whether they use our technology or not, is the fact there is a better way to come up with a piece of communication to put in front of your audience. So instead of just relying on guesswork and being approximate and just using whatever it is that we think is going to work, or I like red, so it's going to be red, or my team more likes blue, so it's going to be blue, hopefully we can inform that process with a ton of data, using things like machine learning and natural language generation to be able to crawl through hundreds of thousands of alternatives to try to understand what emotions are making people tick, what kind of way we should be describing a product, or what is the right image for a particular campaign. So, since you don't need to believe me, we're going to do this live. And what you have on your tables in the golden envelopes are probably like hundreds of different combinations that you could choose to do that same ad. So that is a campaign that some humans came up with. We have anonymized it, but it's quite clear it's a coffee brand. So the way that humans would typically look at this is there is a headline, a sub-headline, a call to action, and there's an image. There's actually millions of ways of campaign this same product to that audience, but that was the choice that was made by their marketing department. What technology can do is blow that up and be able to test hundreds of thousands of alternatives, let's say in one go, to understand what it is that is really making that audience tick. But it is really difficult to do that without data. And what we're going to experience right now is what tends to happen on the tables in marketing, around the table in a marketing department, which is you're going to try to create the best possible alternative to that piece of communication. So you have a few envelopes. One of them is with headline alternatives, image alternatives, call to action alternatives, and sub-headline alternatives, I believe. And you have like a little board. So those are magnets. You can use that board to then come up with the best possible combination that you think would win. And actually there is a right answer because we did run this campaign in market. So go for it. You have 10 minutes and try to beat the machine. Okay, and the winner is, let's see. So this is actually the winner one. There was a 52% lift in conversion just by changing that, a few little things. And this is actually kind of like normal life. When you do change the creative, it can become a lot better. Let's see if anyone got close to that. So there's a couple of groups that use the right image, so you and you. And the image actually in this case was a huge driver of the additional conversion, so we're going to see that. Well, we may have a winner. Okay, here, coffee and espresso. Almost. So no one got it right, which is normal, because
No surprise for marketing.
yeah, like no, but statistically, if you think about that, I don't know how many alternatives you had per field, but you probably had 4 different headlines, 4 different images, and so on. If you actually make the calculation, right? So it's a huge amount of possibilities that we put in front of you. Statistically, it would have been almost impossible that someone gets it right, right? As much as you do have experience as marketeers and gut feeling and all of that. But a lot of what I was hearing was I think, or I feel sometimes. Which again, it's kind of like based on your own experiences. And those experiences are super, super valuable, but they can just get tweaked to get better. So unfortunately, no one won the prize, yes, which was a coffee machine, obviously.
Have you run this in the States? Because this was obviously an American advert, and you've got.
Yeah, so I thought it was UK, but it was actually the States, yeah.
Because
This was,
here you go just made every single person at this table go, no, don't do that.
it's good learning for the next workshop. Yes, yes, yes. But regardless, yes. I think we've probably done this in a with a US audience, and they haven't got it right. It's really difficult to get it right again. There's 1,000 combinations based on just what we put in front of you. It would be even the most experienced marketeer working for that brand would have really, really struggled to get it exactly right for that campaign, simply because the possibilities are way too large for us to consider, and it requires a lot of tweaking. And again, it's something that can only be done with that. The interesting thing that technology also offers you is that not only you know that the second piece of creative was 52% more effective than the first piece, but you also know exactly why. So the headline, which actually is somewhat similar to their original one, but it includes the free shipping on orders above $50, that creates 62% of the impact. So at least you know that 50, kind of like free shipping, in this case, makes a difference. We've seen other campaigns where free shipping is completely pointless. You do know that image and text carries 21% of the impact, so it kind of like it's worth optimizing that image. Tends to be the case on Facebook, not for every campaign though. And the sub-headline and CDA actually don't drive a lot of that response. So I did hear someone saying, I hate you deserve 30% off. I think it's spammy. Well, actually, it's only 1%, so if you hate it, you can change it, no problems, right? But if actually drove 80% of that response, or that 52% additional conversions, well, maybe it's just your opinion and not the opinion of the audience. So it's really around informing what's driving what, and being able to help all marketeers and all creative teams take decisions that are a little bit more based in data and have accountability for what they're putting in market. Now, if you do that, obviously, across every single touch point in a digital journey, which is messy and convoluted and so on, and you do it in a consistent way, you can really lift the entire program just by changing a few words. So hopefully that was helpful. The point of the session was just to show you that there is another way to come up with a piece of communication, that maybe the way that you're doing it today is not the most accurate or even accountable way to spend the money that is given to you. And that technology should be able, and a little bit of discipline should be able to help lift a lot of untapped revenue in a relatively straightforward manner. You just need to change a few words. Thank you. And if you have any questions.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Maria?
Yes.
What struck me about the best example you showed was the language, like kind of conversation, like hey, or did you know? Is that a theme that you've noted?
For some brands. So one thing that technology can do is replicate the way that the brand speaks, right? So if the brand has a particular brand tone of voice or some stories that it tells to customers, it will tend to kind of like stay within certain parameters to make sure that it doesn't sound like a machine. So for that particular brand, there was kind of like that parameter, and that's how it worked. But it really depends, right? When you work with banks or with certain companies, you cannot use that tone of voice or even explore within that tone of voice. So yeah, there's not one thing. What we do tend to see is that even if two brands in the same industry are marketing the same individual, what makes that individual resonate from those two brands may be slightly different because their perception and the relationship with those brands is different. And that actually comes into play. So to give an example, if HSBC and Barclays are marketing to me alone for home refurbishment or whatever it is, I may need slightly different language to pay attention to what they're putting in front of me, even if it's the same product and it comes from sort of like similar providers. And that's because my perception of those brands, my personal perception of those brands, is very different because of how I have related to them over my time in the UK. So there's no one size fits all. It's more around learning what works between a brand and their audience. And then for each segment, it will be different too. Yes? Yeah, no, that's a really good question. The biggest, let's say, elasticity in the response that we see tends to come from like really top of the funnel communication, right? That's where you're really competing for very, very short attention span from people. So that's where you really need to get it right. There's a lot of waste in those channels, and we try to reduce that waste and make more people come down. But within that broader category, so maybe, kind of like the other extreme would be like a landing page, where there's a much, much higher intent, or search, right? There's a much, much higher intent. So the elasticity that you can bring by picking the right emotion or the right description and so on is smaller, simply because the consumer has already taken a number of decisions before getting there. But within the broad category of top of the funnel, I would say it really depends on the brand, and it really depends on how much they have optimized themselves, certain pieces of communication. Typically, there's, whenever like an agency is working with the brand, and the agency also has a lot of discipline on A/B testing and so on, there could be more optimization done. Sometimes elasticity is less, but sometimes it's actually not less at all. So yeah, it really varies. Yes?
Your statistics that you were showing there, 60%, 20%, are those general statistics, or those statistics for the campaign? And the second part of the question, what we've been learning about, so say yesterday and most of today as well, is people buy an emotion and justify on logic. But most of the statistics that you're showing there, the higher impact things were the free shipping and the 30% off, which made a bigger difference. So again, that then goes back to, is logical decisions making more buying behavior as opposed to emotional decisions?
It's a good question. I think, one thing that I would say, just to throw it there, I would argue that sometimes the percentage off or whatever it is also conveys an emotion, right? So there's an element of gratification there, for instance. So, you can, I don't think you can completely separate both. But if you do decide to separate them, what we find is that emotions actually play a big role in top of the funnel, as you would expect, right? Because that's, again, it's a short attention span, so you're a lot less conscious, and you tend to look at something that makes you resonate with that for whatever reason. And that's where you need to get it right. We find that in top of the funnel, for instance, in a subject line or a Facebook ad, 60% of the response, as an average, tends to come from using the right emotion, which is important to know, because if you also get the emotion wrong, the consequences will be disproportionately negative. And then as you go down the funnel, you tend to rely a lot more on getting the exact product description right. Things like the call to action and all of those other fields tend to become more important. Did I answer your question, roughly?
Yeah.
Okay. You had two questions. I completely forgot the first one. So.
The first one was more the statistics.
Right.
Are they general statistics?
Yeah.
As in your headache is X%, or was that for the campaign?
Those are statistics from my company, from Persado. So as an average across all of our clients, and we have hundreds, for Facebook campaigns, we have like, I think it's a 66% lift in sales. Yeah. But that's across clients and audiences and industries, and we work across retail, banking, and so on.